and I want to comment the first thing you said, or the summary of the first thing. Being aware of your basal rate and insulin sensitivities throughout the day in general, right, and not being
Yeah.
afraid to change those. Um, that could be something really difficult for a newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic, somebody who is like Brandon Ma, who was like a fragile diabetic, or somebody who
Mm-hmm.
has like they're crazy up and down levels all the time, or somebody who is so just learning on and starting their diabetes education journey, where it's like there's so much going on. So this is literally the job, or one of the main jobs, of the endocrinologist in the type 1 diabetic life. And unfortunately, you can't always be with your endo. So when you get to a point of comfortability as a type 1 diabetic, these should be things that you do by yourself, and experiment by yourself. This is when the ultimate level of diabetes experiment and control get into, if you're changing your basal rate. Now, obviously, this is a lot to do with pump users.
Mm-hmm.
This can be toyed with a little bit more with dosing of long-acting insulin, but that's even more tricky. But
Mm-hmm.
this is by far the biggest advantage of using a pump, is something like this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
But
great point about like you ultimately probably need to take control. I shouldn't say probably. You ultimately need to take control of your diabetes, and therefore you need to start becoming comfortable with being able to change the settings on your pump. Because that's what got me into trouble with that whole story, is that
mm,
I was so programmed into thinking that I had to wait for my endocrinologist to make these changes that I
mm-hmm.
didn't really make these changes until something like extreme like this happened. And I'm like, I have to make these changes.
Right.
Like I'm not gonna survive the next month if I don't. So I think that was the big aha moment for me, is like I have to do this by myself. Like I can't just rely on my endocrinologist for everything, because I only see him at the time. I think I saw him every 3 months or 6 months, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you have to take control of that, because they can't, or the system right now doesn't allow them to babysit you all the time. And your life changes relatively quickly. Like your life can change really fast in those 3 months, and
Mm-hmm.
things can go downhill fast before you see your endocrinologist.
And not only is it something that you have to do, when somebody hears the word that they have to do it, ends up, it could be either an empowering thing or a very scary thing,
Yeah.
right? Because they feel like they can't rise to that occasion. But we are here to tell you that you can.
Mm-hmm.
Period. There is so many resources out there, not just this podcast, but there's so many other podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
blogs, social media. Um, you know, this is what I hopefully an endocrinologist lives for, and wouldn't be so controlling and say only come to me for knowledge. Hopefully they can give you resources. This is what certified diabetes educators are for. This is what
Mm-hmm.
nutritionists, you can. It's not something you have to do, it's something you ought to do, and we're here to tell you that you can do it. Like, you have this, if you are strong enough to get out of bed after sleeping as a diabetic, what we're talking about. If you're strong enough to get out of bed and face this thing every day, uh, you are strong enough to take control of your diabetes, and to feel comfortable with making some of these changes. It can be scary, but this is literally where the awesome part comes in, because then you can start living a life with a better health, a better diabetes health, when you start making these changes. Um, so that's really empowering when you look at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Um,
ultimately, you are going to be taking control of your diabetes. Diabetes will then have less control over you,
mhm.
because you have that control and you have it more dialed in. Because if you're constantly fighting lows or you're constantly fighting highs because you haven't changed your settings, man, that's just like a nightmare.
Right.
And but if you do end up changing those settings and you get it dialed in, man, it's like, holy cow, the whole world has
Mhm.
opened up and new
Mhm.
possibilities.
Right. Whole new world.